Oh man, fell down, went boom. We're gonna try to install a Rekluse clutch today. Gonna try the old lay it on its side method instead of draining the oil. See what happens here. It actually needs an oil change. Well, maybe not. So I probably could have just done it that way, but it's been raining for 13 hours straight and it's still raining hard. I don't feel like going outside and warming the bike up. So we're gonna do it this way for now. Anyway, I got the bike laying on its side. Gonna remove the parts required to give us access to the clutch basket, and we'll take that off. Then we'll look at the parts and then talk about how the Rekluse clutch will replace certain parts and how it will function. Hold on. It's gonna be a bumpy ride. No, not really. This should be pretty straightforward and pretty smooth. Okay, starting disassembly, we took the bolt out to move the brake lever over. I'll re-grease this when I put it back together. Seems to be pretty dry from the factory, which is interesting. Remove the clutch cable bracket, set it down here. Was able to disconnect it from here after removing it from here, then removed all the clutch cover bolts. Just an FYI, all the clutch cover bolts are the same length, so that makes it easy. Let's pop off this clutch cover and see what we got. Is it going to be loose? Yeah, I think so. All right, let's see if I can work this off here. Be right back. All right, clutch cover off. Gasket stayed intact. Awesome. Little Yamabon on the case. Clean it up with some alcohol or brake cleaner. Let it dry, and the Yamabon should seal it. Probably don't even need it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm a big fan of Yamabon, have been for many, many years. The only oil it seemed like that may have dripped out, notice the rag, was what was in the filter, which is inside the cover itself. There was some oil pooled here. I used Big Daddy to suck it out and force it down that hole there. So we are sitting here now with complete access to the clutch. You've got your throwout bearing right here. It should just be loose. Yeah, it comes right out. And there's the nut that we have to remove to get the basket off. First, we'll take the 4 bolts off with the springs underneath them to relieve pressure, free up the basket. The basket should be connected to the transmission, so hopefully when I laid it down, I put it in gear. If not, we can easily put it in gear. Then we'll use a dugga to get that off. Now putting that center bolt, I'm talking about the center bolt, now putting that back on, you definitely want to use a torque wrench, because if you get that too tight, you could ruin or interfere with the proper operation of the clutch. So don't use your impact to put it back together. I think that's 48 foot-pounds. I'll double check before I do it, but I think that center nut is 48 foot-pounds. So let's take the clutch apart and talk about how these clutches work. Okay, loosening these clutch basket bolts with the springs under them. Just do a little at a time. I know a lot of people just use their impact and just zip these right off. I'm kind of a slow, one-of-a-kind kind of guy. So let's just get these off and we'll see what's underneath. Okay, we got all the bolts out, or loose rather. 2 I've already removed. There's going to be springs under this plate. Take the plate off. A little grease on there from the factory. And we'll grab the springs. Then we can start taking the center bolt out. Stand by. Okay, took about 3 duggas. But anyway, you can see there's a little red Loctite on there that from the factory. So we'll be putting some Loctite on there when we put it back together. Now we can disassemble the clutch pack rather. So let's do that. Okay, we're going to slide the center hub off. And I believe that, yep, there's a washer, sorry, there's a washer right there. Let's not, you know, misplace that guy. In fact, let's just put him back on because I think we're safe to leave him in place. Here's your judder assembly here. There is a spring. This first clutch plate is your judder plate. Notice it's thinner, or you probably won't notice until I remove this plate, but so there's two pieces to this spring. This was an invention to help smooth out the transition from, you know, friction to forward motion when you first engage or release the clutch. Sometimes when clutches get hot, you know, you get this violent shaking, stuttering, juddering feeling, and this was their idea to smooth engagement, I believe. It's not just motorcycles. I think this is an issue with high-performance cars and all kinds of other things. So, but you can look that up. A lot of guys will take this off, this entire assembly, and replace this with one more friction plate, one more standard friction plate. Let's see if I can get this metal plate off. Yeah, like that. And you might, you know, you might get a what feels like a sticky clutch, but I never had that problem. We didn't have these on the dirt bikes back in the 80s and 70s. So, I mean, it wasn't really a big deal. Maybe it was and we didn't know it, you know? We just rode bikes. Anyway, so yeah, if you're gonna if you want a better clutch, because you'll gain a little bit of surface for engagement, you want to remove that judder system and replace it with an extra friction plate. So let's go ahead and take the rest of these friction plates off and steel plates and look at how that works. Okay, real quick look at a clutch and how it works. So you've got this basket, which has a gear on the back, which is connected to your output shaft to your crankshaft. So when your engine's running, this basket's spinning. These friction plates have little tangs on the outside edges, so they're engaging the basket. So if this basket's spinning, that friction plate is spinning. You have metal plates that go in between each friction plate that engage this hub. So the hub moves back and forth, or there's pressure being applied to it by the springs to kind of squeeze the clutch pack, right? It's gonna squeeze the metal and the fiber together, and that basically causes the assembly to become one. So if this is spinning, and this is connected to your output shaft, or your input shaft rather, into your transmission. When you pull on your clutch lever, the pressure is released on this hub, and it creates a gap between all the plates, or the clutch pack, and allows this to spin independently of that. So this can continue to spin with your engine, and this can become stationary because there's an air gap between each one of the plates. As you release your clutch lever, this slowly has more pressure applied to the clutch pack and squeezes all these clutch pieces together, which through friction transfers power from the basket to the hub, to the input shaft, to the transmission, and then you get forward motion. That's about the best I can do at describing this. So let's go ahead and grab the Rekluse clutch and look at what we're going to replace and how they want us to assemble it. You use some of your friction plates, your OEM friction plates with the Rekluse, but you don't use any of the metal plates. And there's a new hub. Let's see how they want us to stack those plates up, because I don't think you put a friction plate right against the basket like I have, or yeah, that's the basket there. So let's go grab that clutch. Okay, the Rekluse clutch system comes with the actual Rekluse clutch itself, which replaces your judder system and maybe one of your friction plates. I don't know, got to read the instructions. Its own proprietary hub and its own proprietary metal plates that go in between your friction plates, and a proprietary rubber band that you use to adjust what they term, I think the term they use is in-play. I think they use a lot of weird terms and it confuses people. I wish they would just say, adjust it to this amount of free play and be done with it. But if you watch their videos, It makes sense what they're talking about, but because they've made up their own terms for what certain things are, it confuses some people. Let's read the instructions and see what we're supposed to do here. Okay, the instructions basically say to put one of the Rekluse metal plates first, the Rekluse clutch, metal plate, and then alternating like you normally would, and only reuse 4 of the friction plates from the stock clutch and none of the metal plates. And this is how it will eventually be assembled. I want to soak the Rekluse clutch in some oil first. It says to do that, so I'm going to do that. Let's pop this back apart real quick and talk about how the Rekluse clutch actually works in relation to engine RPM. Okay, so how many of you, I know I did, actually my first bike was one of those Sears and Roebuck mini bikes for the Briggs & Stratton, so no, it didn't apply to that. But one of the first actual mini bikes or pit bikes or trail bikes, whatever you want to call it, that I ever rode was a Honda Trail 70. And you remember those bikes, as long as the engine was idling, you could just put it in gear, and then as you increase the throttle, it'd move forward and take off. And that was basically a centrifugal clutch. That's sort of what's going on here. This Rekluse clutch, yeah, say that real fast, 20 times, basically is a centrifugal clutch. You've got friction pads on each side of it. You also have the flanges on the outside that engage the basket. And it's held together with these 4 pins. There's 4, or 2 that way, 2 that way. And what's inside here are springs that control the pressure between this half and this half, right? So this thing, remember the air gap I was telling you about when you pull your clutch lever in, there is a small gap that's created between the hub and the basket and releases pressure on the clutch pack, which allows the transmission to spin independently of the engine, or the engine to continue to run while you're sitting still. Okay, that will still work with a Rekluse, but what happens now is if you put it in gear, as long as the bike is idling, it's not going to move forward. You're basically turning your manual transmission into basically one of those old Honda auto transmissions. Very similar, not exactly, but close. You can put the bike in gear, not touch the clutch lever, once it's properly adjusted, that is, and it will not move until you start to give it throttle. And the way that works is as you give it throttle and this spins, because it's engaged to the basket, which is always spinning, remember, these weights, you watch what happens here if I can get it to focus. As these weights move out, look at that, it splits this open and creates pressure that pushes against the clutch pack and engages the clutch pack and causes forward motion. Okay, a combination of the springs that are in here and the new springs that will go in the clutch basket itself from Rekluse basically tunes this to work for your bike, your engine, its RPM, its weight, etc. There's probably a lot of calculations that go into that. If you look at Rekluse's website, the bigger clutches obviously have more of these springs, and obviously more springs in the basket. And I think you can fine tune engagement by ordering different color springs that go in your basket if you're not happy with the way it's engaging, and or the springs that are in here. The 140 clutch doesn't come with any options. You get this pack and that's it. You get the Rekluse clutch springs, but the one set basically. You don't get any options to switch them out to try to increase or decrease the RPM at which the clutch will engage based on centrifugal force. So anyway, it says to soak this in oil for a little bit, so I'm going to do that and we can start putting this back together. Okay, we're treating her to a spa day, bathing in one of my favorite oils, Motul Ester MA2, motorcycle approved, 1550. Actually, that's the oil I run in my Royal Enfield Himalayan. I figured it's good enough for this bath that's occurring here. Yeah, I don't even want to get into it about oil, but anyway, try to always use an oil that's made for motorcycles, or at least oil that's, JASO MA1, MA2 approved. Because super synthetic oils are not good for wet clutches. This is considered a wet clutch. You can imagine what would happen if you had an oil that had additives that, you know, would typically bypass or try to bypass the friction caused by your clutch. You'd smoke your clutch. I personally have used all kinds of oils and have never had that problem, but some people have had that problem. So it's best to just stick with an oil that's made for motorcycle wet clutches. Just because it doesn't say MA2 or JASO or on MA1 on the can, doesn't mean that it's not approved for that though. Like the Shell Rotella diesel engine oil is a really good oil to run in motorcycles, but you have to go to their website to see what it's, to see the specs, and it is, you know, spec'd out to meet or exceed JASO MA1-2 requirements. So I use that oil quite a bit too in a pinch. It's cheap. You get it at Walmart and it works. I've put 60, 70, 80,000 miles on a CBR or ST with 1300, you know, mini bikes using that oil and never had a clutch problem. So anyway, the most important thing about oil is that you change it when you're supposed to. But other than that, try to use an oil that is made for wet clutches. And you'll be happy, and your bike will be happy, and your wallet will be happy in the long run. Here are the 4 springs that come with the Rekluse clutch. They also give you 2 of these little guys that hold that together. I don't know if it's in case you lose a couple or what, but anyway, they're like Zeus fasteners almost. They're quarter turn devices that hold that together. Here is a stock Kawasaki spring. Visually, not much difference. Kawasaki is a little taller. There's really, my calibrated fingers can't feel the difference. The Kawasaki springs almost feel stiffer. Oh, the green ones are definitely stiffer than the non-colored, metal colored springs. So anyway, you use the Rekluse springs, alternating of course, and you know, one green, one steel, one green, one steel when you're going around. I don't think you'd want to put the greens next to each other. That'd cause a lopsided situation. Okay, before I assemble it with the clutch pack, I want to assemble it, you know, without the clutch pack to get an idea of what this should look like when it's assembled. This is the section that pulls up because of the spring pressure that clamps your clutch pack. But anyway, that goes on first. Then put your basket on and look at the relationship of the shaft to these splines so you can see what it should look like when it's assembled. Of course, when you're assembling this, don't forget your thrust washer in case it was stuck to the back of your OEM hub, which you're not going to reuse. So this, you have to kind of line up with those 4 pins that the spring's right on and the input shaft, and then there you have it. So let's go ahead and put the clutch plates in and see if it goes together with a similar look here. Another interesting FYI here is this section here has to sort of be indexed to properly close, or properly fit rather. If you don't get everything lined up and indexed with that Rekluse hub, it doesn't go all the way on, and I'll show you what I mean here. Hold on. So here it is properly indexed. No air gaps. It's all the way on. Looking good. Here it is not indexed. You can see the splines are not meshing with the splines on the hub, and it causes that massive gap there. Not all the way on. Not good. This is bad. So index the rear spring. What would you call this guy? I'm sure there's a proper nomenclature for it, but this is the piece the springs are secured to create clamping pressure on the clutch pack. So make sure that that's indexed with the hub and it goes all the way together. Okay, so I marked mine with Sharpie. I mean, you could try putting this on as one piece right now. It's sliding on, but you've got to line up the basket with the input shaft, which really isn't that hard, but I'm gonna install it one piece at a time, but this will help me get the inner basket lined up. Okay, back together. Always use your torque wrench. 48 foot-pounds on the middle guy, 78 inches on these little guys. And to me, it doesn't quite look right, but it is together. I'm going to reread the instructions, but it seems to me the clutch pack and the Rekluse should be sitting lower, but the Rekluse basket is sitting flush against the thrust washer, so don't know. Maybe that's just how it's supposed to be. Let me check out the instructions. All right, quick review. The instructions said that that's what it's supposed to look like. I guess we'll see. But for those of you not familiar, more info. Here's where your clutch cable connects. And when you pull in your clutch, this moves this way. Notice what happens to this little guy when you pull in your clutch. He comes out. And so what he does is he pushes here. And that releases the spring pressure on your friction plates and allows the clutch to slip. So that's why cable in play is very important. If it's too tight, you're putting pressure on this and you could be slightly slipping your clutch when you shouldn't be. Anyway, let's carry on, see if this thing will go together. Okay, buttoned up and torqued. All little guys are 78 inches, including the two holding the bracket. Cable's on. I loosened up at the clutch lever. I ran the adjustment all the way in to put as much slack in the cable as possible. And then reassembled this because it appears that this does stick out a little further. I don't know. Anyway, the instructions say move on to the setting the air gap, so that's what we're gonna do. And we'll see how it works. Okay, and they're setting the gap portion of their instructions. They tell you to turn this nut until the cable becomes tight. So there's definitely no slack in it right now. And then it says to set the gap, turn this 6 to 8 more turns clockwise, which will actually be tightening this up and making the cable even tighter. I'm beginning to think I should have lubed the cable before I did this. And that sets the initial gap. Again, making up their weird words when they could just, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna go with 6 turns and proceed on. Okay, free play gap adjustment. Again, free play gap, air gap adjustment. This is where my cable ended up with the proper air gap adjustment. That many threads left. Yours may be different. There is no clutch cable play anymore. It's always tight, so that's something different. The free play air gap measured at the clutch cable should be 1/4 of an inch. There's your 1/4 of an inch. And what happens is, you rev the bike to 5,000 RPM, and that lever should move in 1/4 of an inch, and then return to its normal position with the supplied rubber band they give you. So let me start the bike and show you how that works. And it's right at 1/4 inch right now, so I think we're good to go. Probably gonna upset the neighbors. You gotta rev it to 5,000 RPM to get that to work. So let's start. Okay, so now watch that clutch lever. Sorry, watch that clutch lever. When I hit 5,000, it let off. So it moves in 1/4 of an inch and then returns to its normal position. And supposedly that's the correct amount of air gap. So there you go. supposedly it's installed and ready to go. Let's start it back up. I should be able to put it in gear and it shouldn't take off. Yeah, look at that. Slight lugging. So if I give it a little gas, obviously I'm not touching the clutch. Yeah, she wants to go. So finding neutral is pretty important now. There, I got it. You can also take off in second. And like I said, finding neutral is pretty important. There we go. So it's ready for a test ride. But we're having winter again here. It's apocalyptic. I don't know if you guys have been watching the news, but we're getting snow everywhere. There's snow in those mountains right there. And that's not normal. In another month, we should be in the 80s to 90s, and we're snowing. It's been raining. It just tapered off. So it rained for 14 hours straight last night and this morning. Good times. So no test riding, boo. But I think it's ready for a test ride. I gotta put the heat shield back on the exhaust, and I think I'm done. Go clean up my mess. Hope you guys liked that video. If you did, thumbs up and subscribe if you can. See you out there. Also, since there's no, one more thing, since there's really no cable play anymore, I'm gonna lube that cable. Take this apart and squirt some lube. I have a regular cable luber. But also, my wife has little hands, so I'm gonna have to adjust this lever so that, it's about right there. So she can, whenever she wants to use the clutch, she can grab it and pull in instead of way out here. We already put these levers on because of her hand size, so gonna make some adjustments there. Oh, and one more thing. No install is complete till you put the sticker on. Probably makes 10 more horsepower now. Okay, so install's completed and it seems to work well. Unfortunately, no test ride, but I mean, just sitting here in the garage and sitting on it, putting it in gear and giving it a little gas, it seems to be spot on. A couple of, I guess, cons that I can think of. The clutch lever is probably twice as hard to pull as it used to be. Well, the flip side of that is you don't need to use the clutch lever anymore. So I don't know, is that bad or good? You can use the clutch lever. Obviously, when you come up to a stop, pull in the clutch if you want to rev your engine for some reason. And you can still use the clutch for shifting if you want. I don't know that you need to. Without test riding it, I can't confirm that, but you shouldn't have to use your clutch for shifting. The other part of the, not really a con, but I think the terminology they use for setting air gap and setting this and that, it could have been much simpler. And I'm trying to think of how someone who's not really mechanical even would look at this and maybe get more confused. On the cable system, a cable clutch, they could have easily said if when you rev the engine to 5,000, if the lever's not moving at all, then you need to put less tension on the cable. If the lever's moving too much, more tension on the cable until you get the clutch lever to move the required amount, which is 1/4 inch or less. I think they say 1/8 to 1/4. Mine set at 1/4. That probably would have simplified things instead of using the terminology they did. So yeah, if your clutch lever, when you rev the engine to 5,000, pulls in, because it pulls in with the rubber band by itself and then returns to its normal position. If it pulls in too much, beyond 1/4 inch, then put more tension on the cable. If it doesn't pull in at all, or if it's pulling in too little, put less tension on the cable. And that's just way simpler. I don't know why they go through the steps they do to explain why or how to set the air gap or the whatever they call it. Anyway, other than that, it's really cool. Basically, it turned it into the old school automatics, kind of like very similar to that little guy, but also with a clutch. So single track, really technical, difficult stuff, or if, in my wife's case, you're a short new rider and you're on a dirt bike, I'm thinking that's really going to help. No more worried about stalling the bike because it won't stall. And if things get difficult, you gotta, I don't know, in technical stuff, you know how it is. You can fall left or right. And if you don't have to worry about the clutch, don't have to worry about stalling the bike, you can just worry about keeping the bike upright and or putting a foot down and holding the bike up if that's what's needed, whatever. Not having to worry about the clutch, or stalling the bike, or any of that is going to be a big help for her, for sure, because of her height. Would I put one on my KLX-300? Probably. I'm old, I'm lazy. No, not really. Or I probably would rather have it if I was going to chug along like on my Himalayan. That would be pretty cool. Although the clutch on the Himalayan is pretty good. You basically can just let it out and go. The thing has so much torque down low. I think because of the long stroke motor, but has no horsepower, but it has torque. But yeah, I think I would put one on my 300. Africa Twin. If it wasn't $1,500, yeah, I'd put one on the Africa Twin. You'd have the best of both worlds. You'd have a manual and you'd have an automatic. So you'd have a DCT with a clutch. I don't know. I'll have to ride this one a little bit and see what I think to get a better impression on it. But it seems to be pretty cool. And I think it's really going to help my wife quite a bit. Anyway, so in conclusion, yeah, it was expensive, but I think it was worth it. I think she's going to enjoy riding the bike a lot more, a lot less worries. You guys have a good one, and I'll see you out there. Thumbs up if you like it, and I think I've mentioned it before. Subscribe if you can. Peace.